Yes, now there will be 5 minutes.
So, good afternoon to all. My name is Katja Verto, and I'm the president of the AEIP. It's my pleasure to say welcome to the joint webinar of AEIP and Pensions Europe. Closing the communication pension gap, how to provide better information. But first, just a few words about AEIP. We are founded almost 30 years ago, and we represent social protection institutions which are established and managed by employers and trade unions on a joint basis. So this means that we represent paritarian institutions. We have 15 associate and affiliate members from 11 European countries, as well as 14 task force members from 6 European countries. And all our members are not-for-profit organizations. But today, in this webinar, we are addressing a crucial matter, how to provide better information about pension. And the question is very essential, both for the individuals and for the societies as a whole. Because information is always the foundation of trust, and better information contributes building trust in pension system and is crucial for preparing for retirement. So as we will hear today, various methods are needed in building this foundation of knowledge and trust. Legislation provides the groundwork, and on the other hand, pension funds do a lot of themselves to serve their members as effectively as possible and provide different types of information. And I also want to emphasize the importance of this European Retirement Week in raising awareness about pensions. And we have very good cooperation with Pensions Europe in organizing this and also past events during this week. And we are very happy and glad about this cooperation. So thank you, Pensions Europe, and floor is yours, Jerry.
Thank you, Katja. My name is Jerry Moriarty. I'm chairperson of Pensions Europe. I'm delighted to welcome you all to today's event, which we're also very happy to be co-hosting with AEIP as part of European Retirement Week. This is an important week in highlighting the many issues that face us as Europeans in ensuring we can prepare for retirement. The member associations of Pensions Europe represent over 110 million people in different types of workplace pensions and over 7 trillion euro in pension savings. The vast majority of people who have supplementary pension savings do so through their employer. These arrangements, whether mandatory, quasi-mandatory or voluntary, offer many benefits for their members, including lower costs due to scale, collective risk sharing and strong governance. However, we still have a big pensions gap in Europe, with not enough people saving at all for retirement, or many of those who are not saving enough. The gap is even greater for women. As our population ages, we need to ensure that people can enjoy their retirement, particularly as we'll be spending longer in retirement. This is necessary both for human dignity and social cohesion. There are many aspects to achieving this, including having strong multi-pillar systems with a solid first pillar base and encouraging supplementary savings. Pension systems need to be sustainable and adequate. There must be good communications with members of workplace pensions so they understand their pension and can properly prepare for retirement. We must learn from each other as to what works well and what different means are available to improve communication, and I look forward to these discussions at this event. Thank you.
Hello and good afternoon, everyone. I'm Simone Miotto, the Executive Director at the AEIP, and I'll be your moderator for this first part of today's event, where we want to discuss some of the most relevant EU regulatory developments that will impact the way pension information is communicated to members and beneficiaries. And to inform this informal discussion, I am delighted to introduce our distinguished speakers, Jan Seissons and Justin Vray. Thank you both for joining us today. Maybe just one quick housekeeping remark before kicking off the chat with our guests. Please raise your questions in the Q&A box you find at the bottom of the screen, and I will make sure to reserve some time at the end of the session. But now, without further ado, let's start the fireside chat with you, Jan. You are the head of the digital finance unit of DigiFisma, and in your position, you are looking at how financial technologies can facilitate access to financial services and improve the efficiencies of financial systems. You and your team are leading the Commission work to establish a framework for financial data access, the so-called FIDA, or Open Finance proposal, which is a proposal for a EU regulation establishing a framework for responsible access to individual and business customer data across a wide range of services, of financial services, including pensions. The proposal you published back in June this year wants to ensure that financial services customers intended as both consumers and firms have effective control over the use of their data by enabling access to selected types of data subject to customer permission. So the first question I have for you today is how FIDA will promote financial data sharing, and will this new framework facilitate better understanding regarding pension matters?
Yeah, thank you very much for having me and for having an interest on this work which we're doing indeed on data, customer data in the financial sector at large, and I'll maybe come to that in a moment. Of course, pensions are, yes, partly financial products, but they are, of course, also, let's say, social products and have a social welfare element, so they have a special part here. But let's start from the basics. What have we proposed from the European Commission? You may know that we have been working since quite some time on a European data strategy, actually, which would, very broadly speaking, ensure that, let's say, customers, citizens, but also businesses, are actually in control of the data which businesses hold over them, in a way. And this is really the basic thought, I think, of the General Data Protection Regulation as well. However, we want to make this actually operational and effective in the various sectors of the economy. And having control over your data can, of course, mean two things. It can first mean that you say, no, I want my data be not shared on further, basically. I want to limit access as much as possible. And then that's something which our framework proposes also to facilitate, for example, through so-called dashboards, actually, consent management dashboards, so that this is not just a theoretical right, but people also have practical control, indeed, over who has access to their data. And then there are, of course, customers who are willing also to share on their data, actually be that to have a better overview, for example, of their various entitlements in the financial sector and pensions, or for other products, basically. And for that, indeed, the framework also then actually proposes the possibility that they grant access not only to their own, to one provider, but also to other, let's say, financial firms, actually, to their data in a way. That is something which can then be used. And I think there are a couple of, from the economic side, there are a couple of possibilities to provide, for example, consumers overview, or indeed over their financial situation. Or to when they, for example, they know what their pension entitlements are, but they maybe want to do additional savings. Ideally, they go and ask for advice. Now, customers are becoming more and more digital, so probably the more digital the advice is, the more likely they will actually also take it. In that sense, for example, they can allow access to the data for the purpose of precisely giving that kind of advice in a more digital format with probably a bit less paperwork, and in that sense also enable them to actually decide what for additional savings they may want to have. And I think that's a topic which was already addressed, indeed, this need to actually close the pension gap which we still have in Europe. So that's, I think, in a nutshell, the idea of our FIDA proposal.
Another very important regulatory development in the field of pension communication is the next review of the AEIP directive, the directive on the institution of occupational retirement provision. And we have here with us Justin, the head of policy at the EIOPA, the European Insurance and Occupational Pension Authorities in Frankfurt. Justin, following a call for advice from the European Commission in September, EIOPA delivered its technical advice on the AEIP 2 review. And one of the main chapters in this advice concerns information to members and beneficiaries. So could you please elaborate on the key aspects of the advice related to pension communication and discuss how do you believe the review might improve communication?
Well, thank you, Simona. And firstly, let me say thanks to you and to Katja and PensionsEurope and AEIP for the opportunity to talk at this event. As you say, EIOPA's advice on AEIP 2 had a chapter on communication, and this reflects its importance and its growing importance. And I say that because one of the key trends in pensions throughout the EU is the shift to defined contribution. And among other things, defined contribution puts more risks onto members, requires more decisions by them, and therefore communication information is more important. Another aspect is the tendency of EU citizens to change jobs more frequently, and therefore to acquire perhaps pensions from 3, 4, 5 more different employers. And again, therefore, the information they get from each of those and the kind of links between them become of increasing importance. Recognizing those two shifts in particular, EIOPA sort of provided some advice. I mean, by way of context, we noted first the importance of trust in pensions. I mean, you are handing over your well-being in retirement to a pensions provider. You hand over money, you may not see it literally for decades. Trust is important, and good information is part of that. I'll talk a little bit about what we advised and also sort of a bit about the how. In terms of the what, we advised that AEIP 2 require information on investment returns over at least the previous 12 months, that members of AEIPs are told what are their investment choices, what do they have selected, and what is the expected risk level of those selections, that members be given projections of what might be their future pension entitlements on sort of 3 bases: a sort of best estimate, a favourable scenario, and an unfavourable, that they be given information for defined contribution pensions on the past performance of their investments, and also transparency on costs and charges. So that's a little bit about sort of what is the information that we propose be included. In terms of how, we recognise, of course, the increasing digitalisation, and that there are things that you can do with digital presentation of information that you can't always do on paper. But I mean, you have to recognise that those who receive pensions information may have multiple preferences, and what we propose is that those who provide information seek the preferences of the recipients as to whether they want it digitally or in another form. The other important piece of advice we gave was that the pension benefit statement should have standardization at national level. This reflects what I said before about the number of times that people are changing jobs, and if they're getting 6 pension benefit statements, it's important that there is a degree of commonality between those statements so that they have the information in the best way to enable them to take their decisions. National standardization rather than European. Of course, as a European supervisor, that might be our dream, but most people do not work in other countries during their working lifetime, or if they do, they don't necessarily accrue any pension entitlements. That that if you standardise at national level, you will help a large majority of EU citizens, but still not require a level of standardisation throughout the EU, which might be difficult for some pension providers or in some member states to achieve. Thank you, Simone. Back to you.
Thank you, Justin. I will come back to you soon with further questions on your advice. But I would now like to turn it over to you, Jan, and maybe tease you a little bit on the potential benefits of the FIDA framework for individuals seeking to take informed decision about their retirement savings. Some concerns from us, Pensions Europe, but also other stakeholders have been raised about the framework scope in relation to pension, because we are saying that this could potentially result in incomplete pension and financial information for individuals. But let me maybe explain a bit why. So in our understanding, the proposal calls for sharing kind of partial data on occupational second pillar pensions, AEIPs, are in the scope, and personal pension savings, the pan-European personal pension product providers are in the scope, so third pillar pensions. But for instance, it's not completely clear whether pension products offered by insurance companies are in the scope. And what is definitely out from the scope are the first pillar pensions, and rightfully so, because we all know that this falls under the exclusive competence of national member states, and the legal basis of this proposal would not allow the inclusion of first pillar pension in the scope. So my question for you is, could you address these concerns, and how do you think will a limited insight into pension can contribute towards more informed decision?
Yeah, I think we have actually, when we prepared the proposal, we have actually reflected quite a bit on the scope of the proposal, and I think I'm not saying too much if I say that indeed the occupational pensions is something we have looked at particularly in our with our colleagues, also with the colleagues in DG Employment, basically, because of course, as I also already said at the beginning, this is a bit of a hybrid in a way, a bit mix between a financial instrument and something very different, as a pensions product, a social welfare product as well. I think we've looked at different options, and let's say in the end we decided, well, we do think that the principle of having control, and indeed the principle of let's say seeing a potential actually also have enabling actually standardization and access to information in this area is clearly there. Because indeed, on the one hand, these pensions, I mean, the occupational pensions and the third pillar pensions are, of course, let's say, part of an individual's wealth situation. And so if you want to go and get, let's say, additional, let's say, products, it's important information to be part of the picture. But also, indeed, let's say, for the individuals themselves, actually, to see what the situation is. Now, we have, of course, also taken into account, and we are aware that, let's say, this is an area where a lot has actually happened in terms of data access and standardization. And we want to build on that. And one of the reasons is precisely that, of course, let's say the scope of any European legislation on financial services can not cover first pillar pensions, who are of a entirely different nature, basically. So we do see this legislation very much as one element and one, let's say, enabling element, which would then allow, indeed, for individuals to have this complete overview, basically. But it will not, indeed, I agree that it would have its full effect only indeed if it is complemented or put together, actually combined with indeed then the systems which are in place mostly at the national level, actually for first pillar pensions in a way. And we do see a lot of, and you know that better than me, we do see a lot of actually encouraging developments in this in the different member states. So we think there's a good chance that in the end, basically the citizens, they don't care whether, let's say, some information is available based on European legislation or based on national. So if in the end, let's say the first pillar pension information is based based available on national rules, and then the other pillars are based maybe on FIDA. In the end, what matters for them is that it's available. And of course, what matters secondly is that the things work actually seamlessly together. And there also, we come to that maybe also later still, we have provided quite a lot of flexibility so that indeed, let's say, this FIDA framework does not ask actually to set up systems from scratch anew where they're already existing. So you can leverage here on existing systems which exist in the pensions area. And you can, of course, also leverage on systems which do indeed include and or maybe even start from the first pillar pensions which are available basically. So I think there the framework we are trying to be quite flexible actually in a way. What matters is the outcome, that the information needs to be available in standardized formats. But especially in this area, we're expecting actually quite a lot of, let's say, approaches here which would be building on existing systems and maybe upgrading them.
Okay, thank you. And very good to hear that you consider these already existing schemes and potential synergies.
No, otherwise, I mean, honestly, we wouldn't have done our job. I mean, I think that it is an area where a lot has happened, and I think to the credit of the industry, so I think it would not be wise not to build on that.
So turning back to you, Justin, the advice of EIOPA goes somehow in the opposite direction of what we have advocated for. So you are adding more information instead of giving more flexibility to IERPs in tailoring and layering the information. And in the advice, EIOPA writes that behavioral insights should be used in designing the pension benefit statement. But we know from behavioral sciences that more information does not necessarily mean better communication or better understanding, particularly when information is not actionable. And I think we all know that too much information kills information. So how do we square this circle?
Yeah, I don't see a big contradiction here. I mean, I agree with the last thing you said, that too much information does indeed kill information, and that members certainly need information about their pension entitlements, but they don't need endless information, or endless information will not help them. And we have sought to reflect that balance in the advice, that requirements are not repeated unnecessarily. So, for example, the SFDR, the disclosures on sustainable finance, that we propose that there be a cross-reference to that in the pension benefit statement rather than a repetition. So if you're particularly interested in sustainable finance, you can click on the link or whatever to get to the information about SFDR, but not everybody has an interest in seeing that. We've done a lot of work on sort of how people actually receive information and act on it. Various reports, what we call the MAX report, looking at something like the pension benefit statement from a layering point of view, making sure that the sort of most important information is first, and then if you want to find out more, you can go deeper. And we've provided examples of layered pension benefit statements for IOPS to use. Using these behavioral insights, what might a good pension benefit statement look like? I'd also repeat the point I made in the first intervention about standardization, that at least if at a national level you are looking at the same information for each statement, that again will help you absorb the information and come to the right decisions. Thank you, Simone. Back to you.
Yes, thank you, Justin. And I will stay with you, and I would like now to discuss a bit the interactions between these frameworks and the pension tracking service. So, as Jan was saying just a few moments ago, pension data sharing schemes already exist towards beneficiaries in national and EU pension tracking systems, which are tools that provide an overview of pension entitlements for different pension pillars, and as such they enable beneficiaries to get a comprehensive overview of future financial need. When I discuss with my members about pension communication and pension tracking services, I found that there is a kind of overall agreement that pension tracking systems are the best tool to deliver information to individuals, as they can indeed combine information from different pension entitlements. I think there are also studies conducted in the Netherlands by the Ministry of Social Affairs that concluded that pension tracking services are much more effective than the pension benefit statement. Justin, I know that you have followed and discussed this topic very closely. You have also submitted a technical advice on pension tools to the European Commission in 2021 that focused on pension tracking systems and the pension dashboards. So could you briefly introduce your work and also share possibly what has been the follow-up since 2021? Has there been any step taken to encourage the implementation of PTS, or how do you see this? I'm afraid.
He's muted, Simone. He's muted.
Yes.
Sorry.
Yeah.
My apologies. I was muted. So let me start again. Yeah, I mean, I'll say a little bit about each as you asked, Simone, and then address the questions that you put. I mean, the tracking system can be looked at more as a kind of micro tool, and the dashboard as a macro tool. So the tracking system, the kind of unit of analysis, the focus is on the pension scheme member, and what is their level of entitlements, what have they accumulated in their pension fund, what might they expect to receive at retirement age. And the issues there are in relation to data. I mean, to have a good tracking system, you need good data, of course, and there needs to be an element of standardization of that data. And this is something which exists in a number of member states. I mean, the reaction is interesting. You say to some member states, yes, a tracking system would be a good idea, and they say, sure, we've already got one. Others, they kind of throw out their hands in horror and say it's just not possible. There is not sufficient standardization in terms of data collection between IOPS for a tracking system focused on individuals to work at this point. So data is one important point. The other important point is governance, and this comes back to what I've already said about trust, that you have to trust that those who are running the tracking system are doing it for the benefit of the member, not say for their own commercial benefit. So again, it is important that the governance of a tracking system is appropriate. The dashboard is more of a macro tool. This is so the unit of analysis is more a member state, a country, and what the dashboard would seek to show is the adequacy and sustainability of the country's pension systems, whether it be pillar 1, so state pension, or pillar 2 or pillar 3. Again, of course, data is very important, and I mean, much of it exists in terms of, say, for pillar 1 in the Commission's own aging reports, in pillar 2 data held by EIOPA already, but the task of putting it together and finding the right indicators still has to be done. You asked what is the follow-up? I mean, one response to that is, of course, it is for Jan and his colleagues in the Commission. I mean, EIOPA advises the Commission, and it is for the Commission and the co-legislators to take forward proposals. But I mean, my understanding is that they are certainly interested in taking this forward for the Commission's next mandate. We will work on these anyway. I mean, our work program for next year includes further work on dashboards and or tracking systems. I mean, we think that there is enough appetite for perhaps for prototypes or for developments of dashboards among kind of those member states who are particularly interested in this to take place, and that we think that there is there is sort of important work there that that can be done. So we support tracking systems as a way of enabling consumers to make more informed decisions. And dashboards, I mean, we know it is difficult in terms of for governments, for policymakers to get the relevant data, but we think that, again, it is an important thing to do, particularly as pension systems themselves shift to defined contribution. Thanks, Simone.
Thank you. Thank you, Justin. You mentioned the importance of the governance rules, and my next question to Jan will touch upon this matter. So, Jan, regarding the developments of on FIDA again, the pension fund sector raised concern about a situation where data standards or technical standards would differ from current practice, so that parallel data sharing infrastructure should be set up. And this would, of course, comes with cost that for not-for-profit providers like pension funds could potentially be transferred to members and beneficiaries. And overall, this could maybe undermine rather than promote pension tracking services. But as I said, an important factor to consider are definitely the governance rules of the data sharing schemes. And from my understanding of the proposal you table, this proposal is suggesting that data holders and data users will have a fair and equal representation in the internal decision-making processes of the schemes, as well as equal weight in any voting procedures. And we have argued that this could risk hampering the ability of making use of well-established and up and running tracking services. So how do we formulate governance rules of financial data sharing schemes that stimulate both collaboration and workable data standards and technical standards?
Yeah, before I answer to this, maybe let me flag a couple of points also following the discussion, also Justin's intervention. I think it highlights exactly where indeed here this FIDA framework comes in. It's exactly about having data available and about having data available in standardized form. And that is not, let's say, it is not in itself a pension tracking system. You still then need to build the pension tracking system. But of course, where those efforts are underway, it facilitates, of course, the work. I think that's no more than this, but also no less than this is the contribution which FIDA could actually bring in this area. Now we have, of course, considered when we, let's say, assess different options for this regulation, what's the best way forward. And I think in some other areas, payments, for example, I think we have, let's say, gone in the past a bit more in the direction of simply the public sector or the supervisors indeed setting out detailed standards and rules. I think we have here decided after reflection maybe to go a bit a different way and to give more responsibility and also a bigger role on the stakeholders themselves actually, because we do feel that probably in the end they are better placed than sometimes the public sector to actually to decide what are the right technical standards, what is sufficient performance or other things. Now, if you do that, of course, you need to basically make sure that the outcome is basically is fair and balanced in a way. We cannot, as the public sector, let's say, say, well, it's the pension funds association who kind of determine how the rules should be enforced and implemented just alone. Basically, that's not something we could do, and that's where indeed I think, based also on inspiration from some practical examples, basically we suggested indeed this stakeholder approach, where indeed the data holders, so the pension systems in this case, the data users possibly, which can also be pension systems, but also other firms, and indeed, let's say the consumers would actually work on this a bit together. Now, I do realize the challenge, and we have at the same time also recognized in our proposal that indeed, especially in the occupational pensions area, this role could also be taken over indeed by existing actually schemes. So I think we have specifically recognized this role and the specificity here of the pensions, the occupational pension sector. I do realize that indeed, let's say, the governance of these systems where they exist today actually is maybe sometimes slightly different. I think we need to work together to see how we can actually how we can tackle this. I mean, I think and we should all reflect in different directions. I mean, if there is a well-functioning system already, I think we can, from our side, consider, well, maybe it would be easy for the consumers or the data users actually to say, well, I mean, rather than now spending a lot of money and time and effort to develop a new one, we just endorse this one, basically. So formally, it's a joint system, but really what it is a system developed by the sector. That would be one possibility. Another possibility would, of course, be indeed that also on your side, you consider how the governance could be upgraded here and there, maybe. So I think those are different, let's say, possibilities to look at this. I think generally, we should work all in the interest of a similar objective to kind of make sure that there's an outcome which is indeed fair and clear and leads actually to standardized and usable data. I think that's ultimately the objective. And yeah, we're happy to further reflect and work together to see how one can indeed get there. Also with having a regard the specificities of the pension sector.
Thanks. Before opening the floor for the questions and answers from the participant, I have one last question for you both regarding the future of pension communication and perhaps maybe even the interplay of the pension tracking services and the regulatory frameworks you are working on. How do you envision the future landscape of pension communication, and how does the interplay between FIDA, the AEIP directive, and the PTS contribute to shaping this future? Maybe we can start from Justin.
I mean, I can only see pensions communication becoming more important. I mean, that as more and more EU citizens become members of defined contribution schemes, the communication to them will be more important. I mean, characterizing a bit, but when you joined a defined benefit pension, I mean, you need to know your salary and the number of years you've worked at the company, and I mean that is all you need. With defined contribution, it is far more complicated than that, particularly if you also are making investment choices. So the importance of communicating the right information in the right way is only going to grow. I think it's also only going to get more digital. I mean, I said before that preferences should be reflected in terms of how information is received, but one would expect over time benefit statements to become increasingly a digital only product. And I think it's going to become increasingly sophisticated, that pensions will be sort of one form of old age provision alongside others. And here I think FIDA has a role to play. I mean, FIDA is about data sharing across sectors. Pensions, as Jan has explained, occupational pensions are included, and so FIDA will play a role in setting the standards for communication about pensions information. Thanks, Imani.
Not much to add. Maybe I think one additional aspect would be that we hope and expect in a way also that, let's say, there will be a bit of a leveling up. I mean, I think we already have today actually quite well functioning systems in some sectors in some member states. And I think what we can hope to achieve is indeed that there will be a greater, let's say, up-leveling than also in other countries, and indeed also, let's say, the better improved cross-border interoperability of these systems.
Many thanks. So let me now check if we got any question from the public. I see one. I will read it. So as several European countries transition from defined benefit to defined contribution pension schemes, what are the implications for participants in terms of communication? Does this shift require a change in the information provided to pension participants? Maybe this is for you, I think, Justin.
Yes, very much so. Of course, it implies a change in in defined contribution, far more of the risks are on the member compared with the employer, and the members need therefore better information about the DC IORP. They need to know, for example, what choices have they made for investments, what have been the returns on those investments, what is being taken out in terms of costs and charges, what they might be projected to receive at retirement age. All of this information is more important in a DC context, and that is why I think the Commission asked us to look at information to members in the review of IORP2, and why we devoted a substantial part of our advice to it. I agree very much with the question that as several members move from DB to DC, information will become more important.
Thank you, Justin. Jan, do you want to add anything?
I think I fully agree. Maybe just one additional element that, of course, then this also goes hand in hand, indeed, with the need for increasing the also additional, pension, pension products, third pillar pensions, and that's where indeed then also I think the need to think a bit across, products, also across sectors, I think becomes indeed also more relevant and important.
Thank you. I don't see any other questions from the participants, so I will maybe pose one last question to you both, and I would like to look a bit on the data sharing challenges. And the question is, how does the evolving landscape of pension communication intersect with the challenges and opportunities of data sharing? And here I'm particularly referring to the context of financial inclusion and digital assets. Maybe, Jan, we start from you this time.
Yeah, I think it is something. I mean, as indeed pension communication becomes more complicated and complex, more detailed information. That's I think what Justin has quite well explained. Of course, it also becomes more sensitive here and there in the sense of, and that basically speaks very much to the need also of, considering indeed also data, limitations of data sharing. But on the other hand, it also, it becomes more challenging and more difficult, maybe difficult information to read, where then indeed I think also you can see the need and the maybe increasing, development also of, value-added services to help people actually then to say, well, what do I now make out of this complicated statement I have here, either through advice or through online tools or others, basically. So I think that's where indeed I would also see, I mean, a greater complexity, of course, needing on the one hand in a way to the data needs of, data protection, but also on the other hand, greater also need and market on the other hand as well for then services to help and citizens navigate in the system.
Thank you, Jan. Justin, do you want to reply?
Yeah, I mean, I think what Jan said makes a lot of sense to me. I think that, I mean, there are opportunities here as well as threats, if I can put it like that. That the increasing amount of information that is available, the increasing digitalization is if you run a pension scheme, this improves the chances of your members making good choices. There are aspects to welcome as well as some of the complexities and the transition that has to be made. I mean, you mentioned inclusion. I mean, this it's going to be easier to access pension information kind of any time, any place. And this again will help those who are not necessarily sort of working in an office the whole time or in a workplace. I think that there is learning that can be done from each other. I mean, there is good practice already in a number of member states, and one of the roles of EIOPA is to sort of look at what is good in some of our members and encourage use of that elsewhere. And maybe final thing to say, I mean, we have to remember it's the members' money. I mean, if it is in a pension fund, particularly in a sense, if it is in a DC fund in which they are actively contributing, it is their money. They are entitled to know where they stand. So, this is something which all those who run pension schemes responsibly should want to do. Thanks very much.
And maybe also just to add one additional point, I mean, of course, a challenge going forward, I think we're probably not yet there, but it will, of course, also be, let's say, how indeed then to make sure that those who are maybe not digitally versatile and digitally native, how will they then still access indeed also the information? So will we be moving 100% to, let's say, digitalized forms, or will there also be alternatives still? I think that's something where basically, yeah, indeed, we are also, it's a broader challenge, I guess, basically. And the answer is, of course, on the one hand, let's say to enable people and to support people in navigating the digital environment, either through making available maybe, let's say, ICT equipment, dedicated training and other things. And on the other hand, of course, also to see, well, in which areas is it necessary to still, let's say, also provide, let's say, a classical, physical, paper-based information.
Yes, that's really important. We still have a couple of minutes, and we receive another question for you, Justin. In your AEIP 2 review advice, you suggest the possibility of creating synergies between the PBS, the pension benefit statement, and the PTS, the pension tracking systems. The question from the public is, could you substantiate how that could work?
I think the point here is the one that you already made, Simone, that in some circumstances, actually the pension tracking system may be a better way by which members receive information than the PBS. And so EIOPA does not want to sort of insist on the PBS where the PTS is doing the right job. I think that is the main point there.
Justin, thank you, Jan, for being with us today. It was a real pleasure, and thank you for this very informative session. I think we have learned a lot of new regulatory developments that are coming or will come in the future. We already have a legislative proposal on FIDA. Maybe after the elections at some point we will get also legislative proposal for the next review of the AEIP directive. Thank you so much for all the good work you're doing at the Commission and at EIOPA on these files, and thank you again for being here. I would now like to close the session. Please stay online. In about 30 seconds we'll be back with the second part of the event. Thank you for watching. Bye.
Ladies and gentlemen, we will now continue with a panel discussion which will take a completely different approach. Our intention here is to discuss with you, first of all, between the panelists and with the panelists, and then with you in the audience, some new developments and what we think are best practices in good communication with participants of large pension schemes. We will therefore go to something which is way more practical than what we just discussed. Neither of the two is more important. You need both. You need a good policy and you need a good practice. But for this panel, it will be the practice. My name is Johan Barnard. I'm head of International Public Affairs of APG in the Netherlands. I'm joined in the panel by 4 eminent experts and practitioners who know a lot about communication. I would like to mention that we are joined by Nina Brun, Director Development of Retirement Process and Services from Ilmarinen in Finland. And she is in Finland, but she will be here at the same time as well, in cyberspace, if I may put it like that. On my right hand, we are joined by Job Krijnen. And Job Krijnen comes from the Dutch Conduct of Business Supervisor AFM, and he is a senior researcher there. One of the specialties of the Dutch AFM supervisor is that they do have a fairly substantial research department who are doing a lot of research into behavioral economics. And we hope to learn from him what that will learn us on how to do, will teach us on how to do our communications very well. I'm now not entirely certain whether we are already joined in cyberspace by Mark Smith, Head of PR Media Relations with PLSA, the representative organization in the United Kingdom, who will be with us from England. On my left-hand side, we are joined by Claudia Wegner-Waanschaffe, who I think amongst the audience is probably very well known. She is from VBL, a very big German pension provider, in particularly for the public sector. But she is also the first chairperson of the board of directors of the new ETS project, and therefore deeply involved in developing not only a national, no, really a European tracking system, which will connect national tracking systems. We feel that the best way of kicking this off is not to be immediately just boring talking heads, but first to show you some of the very good products which were made by the colleagues at this table. And we will start with seeing a little movie done in Finland, immediately followed, without any interruption, by a little video done in the UK. After that, I will ask two of the panelists' reactions on these two. These two movies basically intend to grab the attention of people and make them aware that pensions is not boring, but is really important and may actually even be fun, as we all specialists do know, but most normal people will not. So bear with me for a second and we will have this nice video.
Okay.
Here. Do I need this? Aren't I loud enough? Ah! Maybe not. But a little birdie told me, could well have been magic, that if we look into our past, it can help us see the future. Ooh! Let's see how well our throwback contestants did today. Let's play the nostalgia game! Who was #1 in August 1990? Was it Kylie Minogue or me?
No,
Definitely.
I'm going to go for Kylie. Sorry.
I'm going to go you.
Yeah, me too.
What took you so long? Oh, it's so obvious it's me. What's the average retirement age?
I'm going to say 68.
I don't know.
Average is actually 64 for women, 65-ish for men. Do you know how to find out how much is in it?
I get the emails.
I don't know. We get a statement from our employer, but if they didn't give us a statement, I wouldn't even know.
Do you look at those emails?
No.
No, we skip them.
There is a way to find out. Pay your pension, some attention. There's a website. It's coming up now on the screen. Or maybe you're there already. But now it's time for you to pay your pension some attention.
There we are again. Pay your pension some attention. Unfortunately, Mark is still lost in cyberspace, so I will give you an explanation I hoped he would have been giving, and that is that the figure which we just saw in the second film actually is very famous to the British public for, I believe, a children's program of several years ago in the UK, and therefore the impact on somebody who has seen those films as a child will be much bigger than what it did to us. And I already like the big hammer. So I felt it was already quite fascinating. But over to you, Nina. What did you think of, first of all, of the British film? And then, is there anything you would like to add on your own film?
Hello, everyone, and thank you for having me in this panel. This is very exciting to be here. And thank you, Mark, for the cyberspace wherever you are. I think the video was great from Britain, and I think this is a global issue that people don't know about their pension security. And I really like the approach they had in that video through humor. And it was easy to understand and easy to relate on also. So they really got my attention with that video, certainly. And you want to know about our video, I have to say it was made for teenagers when we had this Global Money Week. And we wanted teenagers to understand how they are important a part of the system when the work starts, and it's important to be working. And we realized also that meaningful for teenagers is that my grandma will get the pension and you are even a part of that. So that was the main issue in there.
Very good to hear. I hope it also grabbed the attention of our listeners in the wider audience. And I would remind our listeners that actually you can participate in all of this. You can participate by making use of Slido, and you can put in questions. Now I do see Mark showing up. He found his way in cyberspace and is with us all the way from England. I think London, but I cannot really see whether it's London, but he is here. I betrayed that it was a television personality in your film, but I didn't know who he was. Can you help us, Mark?
Yes, good afternoon, everyone. Thanks for being patient with me there. Yeah, that's right. So the audience we were aiming for was the 35s to 55s, and this chap was a children's television legend in his day. So we were sort of asking people, you know, do you remember this guy? Have that emotional response to him. But at the same time, it would remind you, gosh, has it really been that long that I've been putting off making decisions about my pension?
So do I understand you correctly that the key word here in your contribution is the word emotion?
Exactly, yeah.
And did you have the chance, although being lost in cyberspace, to see the nice video from Nina as well? Do you have any observation on hers?
Yeah, I mean, I think it really underscores the importance of recognizing who your audience is and giving them all the information they need in a very careful way. And sometimes you have to go right back to basics to get your message across, and everybody's learning at different speeds.
Thank you, thank you. Now, in order to keep this fast moving and interesting, we managed to squeeze one more little video out of our panelists. And I hope that we will now see the Take Care of Your Pension video, which belongs to Claudia. Let's see whether we can get that video.
What if you're a 33-year-old researcher who doesn't mind moving abroad to work in research labs in Europe? What if you're Alice? Alice is born and raised in France. As a scientist, she focuses on her research area and seeks to pursue her career in different European countries. She has been working in Spain on a short-term contract and is now going to Sweden. Did she build up any pension in her short-term contracts? How will it work if she has pensions in different countries? Alice has over 99 questions. Which pension providers does she have? What is the impact of working abroad on life-changing events, such as partnership, having children, or long-term sickness? To keep track of her pension, she needs a starting point, some grip. FindYourPension.eu offers that guidance. Here, she'll find the info she needs to make informed decisions. Her personal dashboard allows Alice to track her pensions, update her provider list, and create her personal to-do list regarding old age provision. She can store info safely and be informed about the pension providers in each European country. Maybe you'll get more grip on your pension too. Take care of your pension. Create your personal dashboard on FindYourPension.eu.
Thank you. This was also quite nice, and I think it was one step up in complexity, Claudia. Would you agree with me? It's one step up. Is there anything you would like to add to make us better understand the video you brought to this panel? And then, of course, the same question to you, which I put to the other two already. Could you say anything about their videos?
Yeah,
Claudia.
Thank you. So also hello from my side. Maybe I can turn it around and first comment on the other two videos, which I really like very much. And I think they both have a different approach, but to me it works very well. The first video of Ilmarinen, I think it's very good that it addressed a young person and tells a whole story, taking the pain point of why do I pay some contributions to an unknown institution maybe from the salary sheet, until later on in 50 years I will get a pension. I think that's a very good approach. And also the second one, which seems to address more, let's say, normal people, yeah, in what they like to do, being in quizzes or in talk shows, whatever, and also address them with the topic of pensions by a person which is well known. So that's really, I think, a very good idea. Of course, that's both about information as such and more general information. And what Johan meant, what the ETS project and association has been heading for is the other topic we touched in the first part of the session, the pension tracking. And that is, of course, about personal information, meaning personal data, affiliations to certain pension schemes, and so on. And that is what we want to achieve for Europe. As you said already, we have a lot of such tracking service already in place that are good examples. And I think the video is just an example what this kind of service can do. So it gives communication a bit more, not only general, but also personal.
Thank you, Claudia. Thank you. Mark, you now saw this video as well. Would you have any observations on this? And are we going to see the UK maybe not yet back into the EU, but perhaps at least interested in pension tracking? Your mic is off.
How about now?
Yeah, there you are.
Okay, thank you. Yeah, I'm struck, how different we all are from across jurisdictions, across countries, but we're all dealing with the same problem. So yes, this is a piece of infrastructure that the UK is in the process of building. It has a lot of complexity because our market is incredibly large with lots of different providers. But I think that the powerful thing with it is that you show people where to go, and then they go there to do their own learning. So communication is, here are the tools, go and help yourself. Here's the fishing rod, go and find the fish. And I think this is a really powerful way to build understanding and to build trust.
Thank you, Mark. And indeed, this is, I think, a next piece of the puzzle which we will have to set together in order to get better pension outcomes for everyone. But Nina, do you have any observations on this tracking system video? And perhaps also on the European level of it, because you are straight and square in the EU.
Yes, of course, and we get the claims from our digital services that we have in use. So this is very important that we give the service in one channel for people. This is very easy to relate on. Yeah, we want to take this also and put in Ilmarinen digital website.
Thank you, Nina. And then I would like now to turn to Job and give him slightly more time, because he didn't bring a video, but he does bring insights in the research being done by AFM. And Job, please, could you also start with some observations on the film and then bring us somewhat more up to speed on the research you are doing with your colleagues and what directions that will lead us into? Job.
Thanks, of course. Thanks, Johan, and thanks for everyone else. And it's really cool to be here and to be able to look at all these videos and think about them in a little bit more broader sense. And what I like about the videos is that you see two things that I see coming back is like there's clearly thought going into who the audience is here. So who are we aiming for? And that's not just anyone, it's specifically, so for instance, younger people or people of a certain generation. And then a lot of thought has gone into what is the specific goal. So I always think about communication in the sense that you need to set clear and preferably realistic goals, right? And what I see in some of these videos is don't set the bar too high, but think about what is it, like the basic knowledge that people or a certain group might need that we can provide to them. So especially in the first two videos, you see that they're focused on just the question of, am I saving for pension, and how does that work, and where can I see it, and how much am I going to end up with? And I really like that. And then in the second, or in the third video, I'm sorry, in Claudia's video, you see it already going one step further, as you said. It's going from, it's kind of getting people activated. It's going to, okay, where could they go, and where could they actually find data or information on how much are they saving, especially given that they're working across borders. And then from kind of a behavioral science, a broader behavioral science standpoint, we know that this is all great and nice, but there's one step that we have to take, one further step, and that this is that we know that just providing information, even if you get people activated, just providing the information is still not enough if the end goal is to get them to kind of take the necessary steps to get to adequate pension savings. So to just give an example, and I think many people already know this, luckily, is that we know that people are very difficult to activate. People have a tendency to remain with the status quo or to remain inert. And we also know that people are kind of influenced by the environment around them, but also by the way you present these decisions to people. So if you want people to take the information from point A, and you want them to make decisions in point B, so for instance, go to their pension provider and take certain actions or maybe take additional steps to get to adequate pension savings, you need to put a kind of broader choice environment in place. That's a term that we like to use. Sometimes you hear the term choice architecture being used. Examples of that are, think about the right defaults. So because we know that people tend to not take action, what happens when they don't? It's very important to carefully think about that. But there's other things that you can do in the way you present decisions, choices to people, the way you present the options, the way you structure these options. So for instance, if I go to a website, in what order do I see options presented on that website? Also the information itself, how is it framed, which words are used, which kind of visuals are used. Those things have an impact on people's decisions. Given that we know that, we need to kind of carefully think about that. So that's why I always like to think about communication as a part of a broader choice environment, and it works if it's embedded in a kind of carefully designed choice environment. So that's something that we focus on a lot in the Netherlands.
Thank you very much, Job. And then, well, since you represent a supervisor, we all are a bit suspicious of you, and not so much you as a person, but supervisors.
No need to.
Is this something which you keep for yourselves, this knowledge, or is there? How are you actually sharing this within the pension community?
Yeah.
Apart from, of course, that you readily accepted my invitation to join this panel, which I'm very appreciative of. But what is your general way of going about the results of this kind of work? What do you do when you come to conclusions?
Yeah.
Where does that go?
So we try to be as open as possible at the AFM. We try to collect knowledge. We also try to kind of activate the broader pension sector and as well academia, get them involved in doing research or getting insights from research, and then to be as open as possible in distilling and disseminating those insights. So that's also why we're at things like this, or why we sometimes like to present at places or just go into conversation with pension providers in the Netherlands or insurance funds or insurance companies. And we also have a kind of a policy where we try to publish as much of our new insights. But for instance, in the Netherlands right now, where you see that there's a legislative reform going on, we also publish guidelines. So that's kind of AFM publishes guidelines on things like choice guidance, which is something that's very much related to what we're talking about today. So that's kind of part of this broader conversation between the supervisor and the sector.
And is this material available also in English?
The choice guidance guidelines is not available in English. We do have a very good report, if only I can say that myself, very good report on behavioral insights in general applicable to financial decision making. So that's not only about pension savings, and that is available in English. And that gives a kind of simple overview of what are the basics of behavioral insights that are useful in designing, for instance, these choice environments. And I think that's very much applicable to the pension sector as well.
And hopefully to our audience.
Yeah, and you can find it on AFM website.
Thank you. Nina, I have to give you also, of course, a chance to react to Job.
Yeah, it was quite similar things that we have done. We have also realized that understanding the people and events, what happens in people's lives are the main issue, and we have to make research more with the people. So it was very similar things that we do now.
Thank you. Now, I would like to remind our audience, I do see first questions come in, but do make use of the Slido. We will come to the questions which you put to us and try to get the panelists to react to that as well. But first, I do this round that all of our panelists have had a chance to react to each other. So I first move to Mark.
Discussion about leading people to the right decision without worrying about what happens when they don't take a decision. There are so many decisions to take when it comes to your pension. I think people are overwhelmed by the possibilities that are available to them. But the key thing in the communication space here is that we thought heavily about was how do we engender trust, and how do we lead people to not think about am I being scammed here, or can I go and find my own? I think there are so many horror stories. I mean, we wanted to empower people to go and find their own research, and everywhere we directed to people had nothing to do with brands, and it was much more to do with government-sponsored websites, sources that they would recognize, information that they could trust. So this is a key part for us in building our campaign.
Claudia, I would like to have two things from you, because the first question on my list here actually deals with the ETS project. And the question is by Maurice Brandman, who asks, does the EU tracking service include also non-EU countries like Switzerland and possibly even our British friends? Or is there any ambition to go a little beyond the EU? Is it really just the EU? And then, of course, your reaction also on what Job has just been saying.
Yeah, so I would like to react with a quote of our friend Anders Lundström, who always says, start slow or small and think big. So, of course, it was the easiest thing to first connect the tracking services that are existing at the moment, and after the UK is, or let's say also like Germany, working on a new pension tracking system, and we're not far enough to connect. This question was not on the table at that time, but I think in general I can say, of course, Switzerland belongs to the EA area, and also other countries in the long run, if you really find a way to develop a system that is used and works, of course, why not to connect also other pension tracking systems. We once had a talk with the US, with a research team there. So, yeah, but as I said, the first things first. So first we have to work with what we have. And then the question about the reaction. Yeah, I think maybe in Germany the situation is a little bit different about the choice or choices to be made. Of course, we have some if we are in the third pillar, but also in the area of supplementary pensions. For example, in the VBL also offers voluntary products, and there you also have a kind of choice, of course. But what I think, at the moment, our communication is still mainly driven by legal requirements. And that sometimes, puts the whole thing in one direction, that you do not really can make use of the options we would have using digital tools and different ways of addressing people. So that's just one remark to this, also me as a lawyer.
Well, the good lawyers always think out of the box, would I say?
Of course.
As a lawyer myself too. Thank you for that. I would like to pick up on something what Mark said, which I found interesting. He used an important word, and that is trust. And trust and communication, how do they hang together, Job?
Well, trust is very important, as Mark said. I mean, if the audience doesn't trust you, you can communicate all you want, but you might even reach the opposite goal, right? We also know from literature on choice architecture or behavioral research that trust plays a big role. If I'm changing something, if I'm changing the default and you don't trust me, you think that I have some ulterior motive, then you might kind of do the opposite of what I expected you to do. So trust is very important, but I also like to think about trust as not so much as a goal on itself, but as a byproduct of kind of other goals. So probably in most of the examples that we're giving here, we want the audience, the people, to either know something or maybe even to do something in some cases, right? So we want them to be aware of something, or we want them to take certain steps or certain actions. And I think if we make sure that our ways of communicating and the services that we offer allow people to kind of take the steps that help them end up where they want to end up, which is probably an adequate pension, not too little, not too much, then we kind of slowly build trust, or then we keep trust at a high level. And communicating only with the idea of, I just want to garner trust and I kind of don't care about all the others, that's probably not a good idea, which is not what I think is going on here, by the way. But so I like to think of trust as a byproduct of kind of these other goals that we're setting.
Thank you. Well, I suspect from the Netherlands, I see a question by Sander Kramer. Mm-hmm. And he puts the question, I guess, a little bit to you, Job. What is considered effective pension information? What's the important word? Is it understandable? Is it correct? Is it relevant? Is it trustworthy? What would be your one, maybe two, max 3 words, which you think that is the real focus?
That's a difficult question. I don't think I can pick one of those. That's very difficult. I like to think of it as, so there's a reason that for instance, when we think about choice guidance in a broader sense, that these norms, at least in the Netherlands, are kept relatively open. right? Because we like to think about it, it's pretty context dependent. That's also one thing that we know from research, right? The context matters. If I have to kind of summarize my own field in one sentence, it's that. So if I take one solution and I take it to a completely different context, it might not work anymore. That's why I like with this legislation in the Netherlands that this is kept relatively open in that we kind of look at pension funds or pension providers and think, okay, what is accurate or fitting choice guidance in your specific situation with your specific group of plan members? I think with most forms of communication, you can think about it that way as well, right? So you can think about, okay, what is the specific goal that you have with this audience? So that's a kind of I'm kind of not answering the question because I think the answer depends a lot on the goal that is set in this specific context. So that's maybe not the answer that he was hoping for, but setting the clear and realistic goal, given the context, that is the important part. And it can be one of those 4 elements that I forgot his name.
Sander
asked, yeah.
Well, Sander, thank you very much for your question. I hope this still helps.
Yeah.
And if it doesn't, you've got Slido. Nina, I think to some degree, it's not exactly the same use of the word, but in your film you put a lot of context and you had a target audience in mind. You explained you were aiming for younger people. Did you have any considerations around trust or confidence in making this film?
Yeah, of course. Trust is an issue. That's why there was this question that will I get anything after 50 years? Because young people don't believe that they are going to get any pension. And this is a normal issue in Finland nowadays. So that's why we think that we have to give exactly relevant information for people for those life situations where they are at. The information can be the same, but it has to be relevant for the situation. Like when you change your job, you have to have and give information for what happens if you get more job pays well and you get increasing your pension. So we will give the information for the situation where you're at. So that gives the trust the system also.
Thank you. Going back to you, Mark, because you kicked this off. What would be your observations having heard your 2 colleagues? And it's indeed looking at age. Is that the most prominent approach, or should we look for other things, life events, react more to questions which come to us rather than think ourselves what to send? What would you say?
Yeah, I think it's really important out of the understandable, relevant, trust, all of these sort of different pillars. The one that I think we struggle with the most as an industry is understandable. We are forever talking in language and abbreviations that don't make a lot of sense to people outside of our world. We think about using a long, new, made-up word when short, normal, straightforward English words would do. But when it comes to sort of dealing with different ages and different segments, I mean, in our system here in the UK, there is the pension system is most people's pension fund is chosen by their employer. And this recognizes that the employer has a really strong relationship with their staff, and they will recognize when their staff have a big life moment that might be impacting their pension. For instance, if they just had a big promotion, they might have a little bit more comfortable in terms of their income. Maybe this is an opportunity to increase the amount they're paying into their pension. Perhaps they've become aware that they've just become separated from their partner. This is a really good opportunity to talk about how is your pension being treated now. So we emphasize in this country that the role that the employer can play in helping at these big life moments and giving those really tailored. I mean, there's no better segmented audience than an audience of one, and being able to say directly to this person, these are your circumstances, and here is some information that we think will help you in this exact moment for you.
Thank you, Claudia. I believe that on the Find Your Pension website, there's already quite a lot of generalized information available to people, and that you are most progressed, let's say, in the academic world, because lots of people in the academic world are actually very mobile, in particular the most competitive ones and younger ones, doing research in very many countries. Did you ever test or try to find out what people think about your website and whether they are pleased to find this, or whether this is something they visit once and then never return? Do you have any idea about that?
Yeah, at this stage, I have to mention that the Find Your Pension website was started a few years before the ETS project started, and we did this initiative together with the German Ministry of Education and Research, because our system in the public sector, because most universities in Germany belong to the public sector, they also, they as long as they have an employment contract, they fall under the rules regarding or the collective agreement about supplementary pensions in Germany. And that showed us the need, because we as VBL have those on universities as affiliates, and we received all the questions all the time. So what happens if I change the country again and I live, or I leave and go home again and so on? The questions of mobile workers popped up, and that also was the reason why we engaged with the whole topic. And looking at the website, we did frequent research feedback with our users there, and they all said that is a wonderful idea, please go on. So that was always the plea. But what we also could see there was, of course, a little also a question of trust or mistrust. What happens if I give, for example, data, or if I save data here, and are you really trustworthy? So even there, we as a public sector entity had to prove and to show, make transparent how we work and so on, and also talk about issues we might have. And I think that is my key word when we talk about trust in pension systems. It has to do with transparency. And we always have to see that it's not only a question of one pension provider, it's also the question of the whole pension system. So it's hard for the single pension provider to work on trust if at the same time there are reforms going on where people are not happy about. So, but trust is important, and for me transparency is the best thing, and of course understandable information to build trust.
I think I saw Job nodding.
Yeah, so I have two thoughts, if you allow me.
Of course I do.
Johan. But so one thing is that I just started by saying that there's these goals that we have on a kind of individual, or that you might have on an individual level, right? Which is you want the audience or the plan member or the person getting to the pension tracking system, you want them to be aware of something, or you want them to take certain actions. But sometimes we also have kind of an indirect goal, right? Where we want to protect the consumer or protect the individual by transparency as a kind of thing on its own, right? We just want to make sure that the information is there, even if we know that maybe not everyone is going to use it, or maybe there's only a specific part of the audience that's going to use it. But the transparency is also kind of good for the sector, the market, and therefore indirectly kind of protects the consumer. So I like to think about these goals on slightly different levels, right? And that's why I like to really kind of be careful when you think about what am I trying to reach? I'm trying to get the consumer to do something, the individual. Am I still okay if the individual is not doing something or acting, but I still think that the information should be out there, should be available, and think about these different things. And maybe you use different tools, and I also feel that that's also happening, right? That there's different tools or different parts of the tool that are used for this.
Thank you.
Yeah.
I think there's a promise we have to make. I saw a question by Ama Relishki. I'm absolutely sorry for probably mispronouncing your name. But you make a fair point. You say, would it be possible one way or another to make available the place on the website of AFM where the research can be found, and we will try to sort it out afterwards. But we can hardly now stop and get our laptops out to give it to you. But we will try to find a way that it will be available. And anyway, this I think this video afterwards will be made available for later viewing as well, and we will try to find a way of getting this information certainly to you, Anna, but in fact to all of the audience. I think there was another element popping up in our discussion now, which I think also is interesting to pay a little attention to, and that's the question of, can you make your communications tailor-made, or do you have to have a general approach where basically you say the same thing to everybody? Or is it possible that you start out much more from what somebody is asking or what you expect this person putting a question to need? Maybe Mark, can I start with you on that one?
Thank you. In setting up our campaign, we thought long and hard about what messages we wanted to tell people, who we thought we were trying to reach, what specific general advice and guidance we could give to people. And we fell upon the slogan, pay your pension some attention, because it's something that whatever stage you're at in your journey, however close or far from retirement or early or late into your career, that's something that applies to everybody. And then from then, we had a sort of funnel approach. I mean, if we got people to sort of be interested in that narrative, come and pay your pension some attention, then we would direct them to a website, and on that website it would say, are you at this stage or this stage or this stage? So do you need to go and get a specific guidance, a conversation? That the UK government offers free phone calls and webinars with people who are over 50. So if they're close to their pension, we would direct people to go and book one of those. Whereas if you're a little bit not as far along your journey, but you recognize that, oh gosh, perhaps I've got 3 or 4 or 5 or 6 different pensions in different places, we would direct them to our pension tracing service here in the UK, where people could go and find those. Or if you were brand new on your journey, then we would direct people to government websites where they could just go and find general information about how it works. This percentage of your pay is likely to go into this product and it's invested, and here's how it all works. Don't worry about it. It's generally taken care of. You will be fine if you keep these contributions up. 20, 30 years later, you will have some money to retire on. So I think it's really important that, coming back to the premise of the question, to have some general messages that apply to everybody, and then you can start to funnel people down into the right pipe that applies to them. But you have to really understand who you're talking to and how they're going to interact with the next level of messaging that you give them to keep it as relevant as possible.
It's also a question in practice for Ilmarine, and how are you handling it over there in Finland?
Like Mark said, the relevancy and the human-centric thinking is obviously important for us also. And we have been also thinking, where can we reach people? And maybe sending 1 million letters is not the way to get the people excited about pension. So that's why we also wondered, where are they and what is the relevant place? Where are people checking their day-to-day lives when they are watching their savings or cash? So we realized that we have to give the information through banks, because the bank is the way you manage your cash situation and savings and so on. So that's why we decided we have now a service where we offer a link and easy access for the pension accuracy, and it has been a success. People now on their 20s and 30s are looking this information often, and usually people come in our website like when they are in their 60s. So this was a great thing. And I believe this has been the best thing for many years that we have done.
Thank you. And in Germany and at the European level, Claudia?
Yeah.
So VBL as well as ETS. I'm just misusing that you've got 2 hats.
Yeah, of course. Regarding VBL, I think we also use this approach of targeted information in a way that we offer different life situations, or, for example, changing jobs, or for new clients, of course, so kind of segmentation, and also the active employees and the pensioners, of course. Regarding the European perspective, the mobile workers perspective, that is as such a tailored, let's say, look or perspective. And of course, that was our basis to invent, to work on communication, to work on the design of our website and so on, that we get aware of this specific situation. What do mobile workers need? And all the communication that is part of our guideline we have worked out together with Professor Lisa Bruggen from the Maastricht University, that we always have, also as pension providers or whoever designs information on pensions, have to be aware the perspective of a mobile worker, that this might be different than a normal citizen who has not worked abroad. So this is one. And then we are also using live situations, because we think, of course, all mobile people have their personal situation wherever they are. So
could you explain for those in the audience who are maybe not pension specialists, what those life situations or life events are? What are you thinking of?
Yeah, in our case, of course, you can have a lot of them. In our case, we focused on younger persons who do not know about pensions and are not really interested. And then we have a second group, or a second topic, and that is family and pensions. That's all about, for example, if a person dies, what happens with my children and so on. And that is also really a question, for example, researchers have. That's one reason, if they start to build a family, that they start thinking on their pension provision for later. So, and the third one is approaching retirement, because of the questions. If you have to apply for pension, that is completely different than what you would tell a young person who has no idea, maybe even on Social Security, to show them why Social Security and hopefully also supplementary pensions should accompany you during your life and during your career. That is the approach there. And of course, questions and answers are different then. So we are using question and answer style, and also in a layered approach, so that it's not a long text. That's very important. Not a long text, not more than one paragraph. And also the language should be understandable and avoid of jargon, of course. So that's...
Job.
Yeah, so what I'm...
How does the supervisor listen to all of this? I know you're the researcher, not the supervisor, but what are you making of this? So how can you help us to do even better?
Yeah, so what I really like in these answers is that a lot of thought goes into how can I make it as easy as possible for the individual, right? So both with tailoring to the specific audience, with the example of Nina, of like where do people actually go, and with this last example of like keeping it short. From behavioral research, one of the kind of most important insights is that we know that people tend to focus mostly on the present, so they're present biased. It's a term that I think many people in the pension sector know, because it has big consequences. It's one of the reasons that we find it difficult to save for ourselves, because kind of the end goal is very far away and the here and now is very close by, and we tend to focus on that. So we don't want to spend our money on the distant future. But it also has a different side, and that is that people have a tendency to procrastinate or to not take actions because there's these small obstacles that are in their way. So a very small obstacle can have a very big effect on people's behavior. So if a website is a little bit difficult, or if the information cannot be found in the location that I expected it to be, then that might actually have a very, very big effect on where people end up. So I think aside from, and that's what I see in these examples, aside from thinking a lot about what should be in the information, what should be the content of the information, we also need to think about where am I bringing this information? Where are people actually going to find this information? How easy is it for them to process? Because we know that these small obstacles can have a big effect. And that's again bringing back to the kind of broader idea of a choice environment. I think this is all part of it, what we're hearing here.
Thank you. I think that's a very important remark, that we should not, as pension people, just focus on content, but that we have to think way longer about delivery and about how do we make it attractive and how do we make it actionable.
Yeah,
that's. I think that's very important. We still keep questions, getting questions from the audience, and we got a very difficult one, which is very specifically Dutch, which I will therefore translate into something more European. I've got a question by somebody whose initial is G, and then it starts with den, and I suspect it's from the Netherlands, and then after the den something should follow. So unfortunately I cannot really say your name, but you make the point, the way I see it is that since in the Netherlands there's a pension reform ongoing, a law passed by the parliament which is now going to be implemented, there is a change which goes somewhat in the direction of DC, traveling somewhat away from DB. It's not really a straightforward on-off question, but such a reform creates uncertainty with people and a need perhaps for more information, and also how do you maintain trust levels when you are going through reform. And before, because I'm just your chair, so I try to be not knowledgeable about anything at all, although I work at the APG. But before victimizing Job on this question, I felt it might be interesting to look at the other panelists and ask them whether they have any experience in their countries on reforms having undertaken and what they did at the time, or what they would suggest or what they think would be the most effective in order to coach a pension system which is in a transformation from a fairly reasonable trust situation into another, at least equally good trust situation. Although we all understand that if you create unclarity, this is something most people are not going to like. Mark, I think in the UK over the last, let's say, 20 years, I take it very widely, huge changes have been taking place in the pension arena in the UK. I tend to remember a very big ugly monster, for instance. I don't know his name anymore, or her name. You even don't know whether it was a he or a her. But have you got any suggestions for how do you communicate in an effective way when you are transitioning from one system to another?
Yes, I remember fondly the character you're talking of. For those confused on the audience, this was a big blue fluffy character called Worky. I think we would describe their gender in today's climate as non-specific. But as I said, this is a character invented by the government department to tell employers about a new regulatory regime that was coming in that basically meant what we had is the market problems, people living longer. These are trends that you all know about, you know, the old system of pensions whereby people work a certain amount in their careers and then their company agrees to pay them X% of their salary until the day they die. It's a fantastic system. People have reliable certainty of their income. Of course, the problem for the companies is that everybody was living much longer than they anticipated. So they pulled away from these systems to stop funding these systems and decided to move to a defined contribution system whereby all the risk is carried by the individual. Again, I'm not teaching anybody here, I imagine. The problem we found is that these funds went away, and we then asked individuals, it is now your responsibility to save for a pension. And of course, nobody did, because they don't like to think about these problems. It's quite confusing to navigate, and it's simply, you know, they're not going to do it on their own. The government, recognizing this, introduced this thing called automatic enrollment, where the employer had to take responsibility and automatically pay a certain percentage. It started as a very, very small percentage, so the cost wasn't too scary to employers, and it has been increasing since then. And this big blue monster was designed to, I can't even remember the narrative of the advert or why there was a big blue monster, but this big blue monster was supposed to represent the looming deadline, I think, for the employers to get their house in order. I've also spent half my career in Australia, where they're even further along this journey. than we are in the UK. And I think the fascinating thing there is nobody really cares about the amount that they've saved up into their pension pot until it represents about 1 times their salary. And then they start to really pay attention. They think, gosh, this is a really important amount of money. I need to be thinking carefully about what I do with it. Now in Australia, they're having a very, in the UK, we worry about, are people paying in enough? In Australia, they worry about, are people taking too much risk? So people are allowed to go and manage their own pension in Australia and invest it in within regulatory restrictions, basically whatever they want. So this creates some different problems depending on how far along the journey you are. But I think the lesson for the Netherlands going into this is that I think in the first instance, individuals won't know this change is happening, and they won't be interested and they won't be able to understand it. So there's even more onus on those of us with the knowledge about what's going on to communicate it to them. And I think, as ever, keep things short, simple, understandable, relevant, and all those questions about building trust, just to remind people that this change is happening. So I think those are the lessons from my experience working in slightly different jurisdictions.
Thank you. That's all very interesting. I turn now to Claudia. Germany also has had over the years several pension reforms, but this is completely different from the approach now taken in the Netherlands. The interesting thing and challenging thing in the Netherlands, which is creating a lot of normal people a lot of worries. Whether they are in content correct or not is another point. If you have the worry, you have to worry, and you have to find a way of dealing with that. And I think we have to be much more accepting that it's difficult and that you have to help people go from place A to place B. We will take our old pension system and put it all into the new pension system. So this is immediately effective for everybody in the system. So that's an enormous amount of people. In Germany, on the other hand, I believe, but like Claudia is German, so she will know a lot better than I do, so I'm a bit speculating perhaps. In Germany, the fashion so far has been much more to add a new pension system without scrapping the old pension system and not moving people completely from one to the other. And I believe now you are in 4 or 5 different types of occupational pension systems existing at the same time.
Yeah.
What would you recommend us in the Netherlands, or what would be your aspirations or your fears if you look to the Netherlands and if you hear these stories?
Yeah, that's in fact a good question, and I follow these developments for some years now, and I was always wondering, why do they always put everything under question and discuss for years? And we in our working groups, what about the Dutch pension reform? Yeah, we are still discussing. And is it now decided? No, it's not decided. So that was really interesting to follow. And in the German, how shall I say, landscape of second pillar, we have accepted these different ways that can be done. And it's, of course, employer-driven. So the employer is the one. There is no mandatory, no obligation. So it's still a voluntary thing, the second pillar provision. And yeah, it's sometimes, of course, the experts discuss about why there are differences and why do they follow different legal bases, for example. But at least I think as long as it reaches the goal, it's okay. And taking up the reform topic, there I think looking also at the first pillar, because I think we should have this cross-pillar view. In Germany, we had a very stable system, so to say, and that is now maybe on an edge regarding looking at the discussions, because people get more and more aware that the pension level decreases and that we have really this problem of demography. And that should be the time, of course, to make people aware that they have to do something. Maybe there you are much further than Germany is. But that's for me the moment where we have to improve our communication. But this is something to be done by all pillars. And for me, again, coming back to my lovely topic of pension tracking. I think a pension tracking system is really a good means, a tool to give this cross-pillar information and also to cooperate when designing the information to give people a complete picture of where they stand. And to add as last point, in Germany we are about to set up, as I said already, a pension tracking system now, and it's planned to even make the connection obligatory for pension providers who are in the scope of Europe 2, and so it will grow hopefully, and I think that's a good means where we can go on to tell the story of the whole pension landscape and not only one source. Yeah, that's would be my message.
Thank you. That's a very good thing, because that's something which will help me for my very last question. But before I get there, I would first like to ask Nina whether she has got any advice looking at what we just described, and then how would you tackle such a thing in Finland? I don't know whether you went through any considerable pension reforms. You quite well may, but I'm unfortunately not aware of it.
Yeah, we are now planning for a new reform, so we'll see what happens. I'm not in those tables. I can't tell. I can't know. But we have the earnings-related pension system. So the difference is how long you work and what is the pay you get from the work. And I think this is not so issue in Finland, because we have this constitutional property protection for pensions. I'm not sure if you all have that, but we have, and that's a main thing that we have. But of course, we don't know what happens in the future, and if this kind of movement is going to happen, I think, Mark, I will call you then. How can we then give this information for people? And I believe this could be a very new thing for Finnish people then.
Thank you, Job. I think I've tried to postpone, but in the end, I think you representing AFM and me representing APG, what's our task in alleviating the uncertainty?
Yeah, so I feel I'm in no position to comment on the entire Dutch reform, but one thing that I think from the perspective of consumers is very important is that we have certain safeguards in place when we're doing this, right? And two that are very important, and I think also kind of will increase the role of a conduct supervisor like the AFM in the near future, is that one is transparency. I think that's a lot of what we're talking about here, is just making sure that the right information is out there, that people are able to figure out what's going on with my money and what are the consequences on the long term. And the second thing is what we tend to call choice guidance. So that's this a little bit, taking this transparency a little bit broader, just because we know already that just providing and putting the information out there is not going to help people, or it is going to help people, sorry. It's not going to be kind of the end goal. We need people to be able to do something with it. And that means thinking about taking away thresholds, thinking about ways to combine information to kind of make it as seamless as possible. And then if people think somewhere along the way, I need to take action, whether it is second pillar or third pillar, they're able to do so quite easily. And I think that's those safeguards, if we put those in place from the perspective of the consumer, that's very important.
Yes, and I think the other thing which I would entirely share with you, where we, I think, fully agree, is that we think this is an issue to be taken serious, although at the same time we're fairly confident that it can be done. And the Netherlands would not be the Netherlands if we did not create a control system. So I think it was only last week, that perhaps even this week, that a specific governmental commissioner was nominated to oversee the whole process, who will be in a sort of position from which she can actually contribute, report, complain, steer, without really necessarily big powers, but just voicing it and drawing attention to it hopefully will help. Now, a very last question for which you have about 1.5 minutes before we go to Matti, who has the unenviable task of trying to make all of this coherent, also with the first panel and his own or Jerry's introduction. What one word would my panelists like to leave with the audience they should not forget about what we tried to bring on the table? Claudia, which word would it be for you? Or which idea? And really very short.
Okay. What comes to my mind is the word story. I think we have to tell stories also in the pension matter, and we have to find ways to tell our customers the story that reaches them and leads them the way, guides them the way what to do. This find and formulate.
Thank you. I go because I have to be very quick. Nina.
Life situations, would I say, and recognize when is the relevant situation to give pension information.
Mark. Mike.
Boring or difficult people find this industry, so make your messaging fun.
The word fun, Job.
We can also end on that, but no, I agree with fun. Make sure that you embed the communication in the broader choice environment. Make it as easy for people, as seamless as possible.
Thank you very much. I see now interesting questions coming in from Peter Gramke. Several of those, some of them going to Job. Now, I happen to know Peter. And since time is running out, I assure Peter that I will bring you into contact with Job. Job, I will bring you into contact with Peter. And I'm really sorry for the rest of the audience, but some of the questions are quite good. But we can't do it in negative half a minute, which I already stole from Matti. With this, over to you, Matti.
Johan, and thank you everyone for joining us today for the AEIP and Pensions Europe joint webinar, Closing the Communication Pension Gap, How to Provide Better Information to Members and Beneficiaries. We first looked at the EU regulatory developments, and I'd like to extend my warm thank you to our esteemed speakers, Jan and Justin, and of course to our moderator, Simone, for sharing their expertise and perspectives. It is clear that there is significant work being done at the regulatory level to enhance transparency and engage pension beneficiaries more effectively. The IDOR directive is very important for pension funds, and EIOPA's work will form the basis for its revision. It will take some time, but it will be there. I also found the digital finance initiatives important and also insightful in terms of leveraging technology to close the communication gap. During the second part of the webinar, we heard many interesting things and examples about effective pension communication, and I want to thank all panelists, Nina, Job, Mark, and Claudia, and of course, our excellent moderator, Johan, for this second part. It is clear from the examples and best practices that good communication plays a pivotal role in improving, in the end, retirement outcomes, from leveraging behavioral sciences to simplify complex topics, to innovative multimedia campaigns that resonate emotionally with the audience. It is evident that there is no one-size-fits-all approach, methodological approaches that need to be designed for different and for different people. The videos showcasing communication tools demonstrate how personalized, engaging and consistent messaging can empower pension participants to make informed decisions about the financial future. Good overall pension communication helps understanding, improves decision-making, trust, efficiency, and member assurance during and after people's working careers. It leads to better pension experiences and better outcomes. Good pension communication typically involves several key elements, as we heard today, such as clear language, timeliness, personalization, multi-channel approaches, visual aids that improve understanding, consistency, and a clear call for action. Transparent, member-focused pension communication is important for higher engagement and retirement readiness. As we now conclude our part of the European Retirement Week 2023, I hope we all feel motivated to continue this critical work of closing the pension information gap through member and people-centric communication. I want to thank again our speakers, and all who helped to organize this webinar and provided this platform to exchange ideas and valuable experience. Thank you all who have joined us this afternoon, and we look forward to 2024 and the 4th edition of the European Retirement Week. Thank you.